Got to replace those with Sonic or something, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on away from Nintendo because it's depressing. Let's talk about boy.
What are you going to find that's less depressing?
I don't know.
None of these topics are. Yeah,
I know they're all bad. It's all bad news today. Bad news bears. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the NerdNest podcast. We've got Rich, we've got Russ, and me. Carrie couldn't make it today, but we have a lot of stuff to talk about, and I want to start things off by talking about emulation and whether or not emulation can survive Nintendo, because Nintendo keeps making all of these moves towards squashing emulation, and it's all anybody's been talking about lately. I think all of us have put out videos about this. So let's talk about that topic, because Nintendo just went after Ryujinx, after they just went after Russ, after they just went after 8500 Yuzu clones, after they just went after Yuzu. Nintendo is bringing the hammer, and they are going scorched earth. So let's talk about Nintendo and whether or not emulation can survive this. Russ, you're the emulation guy. You spend a lot of time talking about emulation on your channel. What's your thoughts on this? Do you think that emulation is in real danger, or is it just a temporary thing?
I do think this is, it's a Hydra situation. So you cut off one head and another appears kind of thing. Emulation's always been that way. But I think that, taking my own feelings outside of it, Nintendo is being very smart about it in that they are cutting off the right heads. They're going directly after the most senior developers within the scene when it comes to the Switch in particular, right? So it's not that Yuzu went away. It's not that Ryujinx went away. It's that the team members who have been doing all that work are no longer working on those projects. And so it leaves like a gap there of just kind of knowledge. And so I think that part is probably in trouble, not necessarily that it's going away, but that it's set back in terms of just that technical knowledge being lost, at least from that perspective, But I don't think emulation is going to go away. I think there's always going to be people like us who just want to enjoy games on other platforms. So,
I made a video earlier this week. We're recording this on Friday, so if any crazy stuff happens over the weekend, by the way, that's why. We're just recording. Usually we record on Sundays. We're recording on Friday today. But I made a video earlier this week where I guessed, or I hypothesized that the reason that Nintendo's doing this is because the Switch 2 is coming soon, or the Super Switch. I'm sure Carrie will yell at us at some point. The Super Switch is coming soon, and from all the reports and rumors are that it's just a slight power bump. And when you have that slight power bump, that means it's going to be pretty easy to emulate, or it could be pretty easy to emulate Super Switch games as well as Switch games. What do you think about that, Rich?
Yeah. So, I mean, certainly graphical fidelity, right, is a barrier to emulation. But it's not the only barrier. And so what sort of cryptographic protection is actually in place is probably a bigger one, right? And so Switch was famously there was a hardware vulnerability with just the Joy-Cons early on, right? And just you could use a safety pin to set a kind of like an emergency switch on the Joy-Cons, or where the Joy-Cons would be connected, and that's how you jailbroke your Switch. And so it's easier, it's more accessible, it's going to become more mainstream and popular or desired if it's easily emulatable, right? So that is a type of barrier, but the other type of barrier is just making sure that there are protections in place. And Nintendo, I guess because they've leaned a lot on their legal team, has not necessarily been the best at that. So that's one thing where I think they have to if they really want to prevent it, they need to put some more friction, some more space between the developers, the hobbyist developers, and their hardware. They've traditionally not been very good at that. And I think, to that point of whether or not emulation is dying, I think, you look at the like emulation and cracking scene of like the late 90s, early aughts. There was a lot of like secrecy and a lot of anonymity in those scenes. And I think that we've, as a community, an emulation community, we feel like a sort of like moral high ground, like emulation is legal, which it is. Emulation is
Depending
legal.
on where you are.
Which jurisdiction, in which jurisdiction is emulation, not backups, emulation illegal? I don't know.
I don't know. I'm just telling you what everybody always says. It depends on where you are, but go ahead.
Yeah. So I think we have this like moral high ground now where it's like, oh yeah, emulation is fine. So like you shouldn't come after us. And that's true. They shouldn't come after us, but they do clearly. So
Yeah.
What I suspect is going to happen is there's going to be a lot more of old school scene where there's a lot more anonymity, a lot more behind closed doors. The public won't see the emulator until it reaches a certain state. There's going to be a lot more of that where just folks are working behind the scenes, and one day we get to see what happens. But yeah, you can't stop hobbyists from being hobbyists and tinkering and stuff like that. So I think that's going to happen. But yeah, that should be the result, I imagine.
I do think that there's a lot more transparency now than we used to have with emulation and what people were working on. And every time that I put out a video about this, there's always comments in there, and I'm sure that you guys have seen this too, but there's always comments in there where somebody's like, well, now Nintendo knows. And I always want to reply, well, oh, and not just Nintendo, but whoever it is that we're talking about. And I always want to reply, listen, if I know about it, they already know about it. They're not finding out about it from me. It's not like Nintendo was watching my video or Russ's video or anybody's video, and they're like, holy cow, I had no idea. Instead, what they're doing...
Big switch?
Yeah, they heard about it well before we did, because that's just or at least at the same time as we did. So I saw a lot of people pushing back on that we shouldn't make videos about this stuff, because if we do, we're kind of helping the content holders find out about this. What do you think about that, Russ?
I get a lot of those comments too, like, oh, it's your fault for talking about emulation. You've made it so popular that now, you've made it too popular, basically, that we shouldn't be talking about it. And I understand, like, I get people from that perspective. They're like, you're taking away my good stuff, but the thing with our channels is that we want to tell other people about this good stuff, because there are a lot of great people who want to enjoy these things in the same way that we are, and we want to share that love. I mean, that's like the point of my channel, was literally like, these things are so cool, I want to talk about it. Where can I talk about it? I'll try YouTube, like that's literally how it started. And I don't know, I don't want to take away that joy from anybody else. So I don't see myself ever taking away from that. I understand there are consequences to every action, right? But to me, the positivity of our channels and being able to push this kind of stuff far outweighs anything that someone else wants to do with that information.
Yeah, and so then you have when you're looking at like this emulation and like Nintendo going after YouTubers like you or like Point Crow, you get a lot of people that'll also say things like, well, they're going after you because you're doing something wrong. And I got, like, there was a whole bunch of arguments happening in my comment section about the MIG switch dumper, about, is it piracy to use it? And I said, it can be used for piracy, but why would you use that for piracy? Because it makes an exact copy of the actual cartridge. And if I used, or if Russ, because I don't have one, if Russ has the MIG switch dumper, puts it in, makes a copy of it, uploads that, and then Rich downloads it, and these two guys jump online at the same time, Nintendo detects that and it kills your account. So like, it feels like that's one of the worst ways to go about piracy. Am I wrong about that?
No, so that's one of my main, and I probably didn't spell it out well enough in my MIG switch videos, but like that's like, I actually really respect the fact that that already is in place, that there already are anti-piracy measures in the whole MIG switch process just by virtue of Nintendo's own system. And I think that that's actually pretty awesome. My whole point within all of that stuff was like, great, like assuming like all of these things, that we are not going to do all of those things that will lead to your account and your Switch being banned and all that kind of stuff. What do we have to work with? And what we have to work with is being able to back up our own games in a safe, legal way that's going to allow us to not get banned or any of that kind of stuff. And that's the exciting part. And that's the part I focused on in the video, because that's, to me, the only way to use the MIG switch is to basically back up my own library. And I think that's amazing. All that other stuff is too dangerous for me to, like, even as just a user, to even attempt, and not let alone even just show it on a video. And so that was always the frustrating thing for me, is like, hey, I'm kind of on your side here, Nintendo. Like, I'm telling people this is an anti-piracy kind of thing, but it's a great backup solution. And that's what I wanted to show off. So anyway.
What do you think about that, Rich?
Yeah, I think, like I had like you said, we all had videos. And in my video, I talked about the analog to the comparison to like backing up your own cassette tape, backing up your own VHS tape, making a copy of a book. I'm sure everyone here, we're old enough. We've made a copy of a page from a book once or twice. Is that inherently unethical? Is that inherently, illegal? And I would say not. And so I think that's what that is, right? Like, yes, is it possible to pirate? Sure. But if piracy is the problem, find the pirates, right? Like, do the work of finding the pirates and dealing with the pirates if that's the true problem. But I think, we've seen that Nintendo is just looking for probably like the easiest target. It's like they're looking for the ability to point at someone and say, this is what happens if you do this, right? Like, that's really what it seems like. And to use the legal system to try to prevent other people from doing the same thing.
Right. And with the example that you gave of making a copy of a cassette tape or something for olds like us, you look at that cassette tape. I could make a copy of a cassette tape and then hand you that copy and you could listen to it, no problem. And that absolutely is piracy. But if you use that as an analog to it's not called a MIG switch. They changed the name.
MIG flash.
The MIG flash. Yeah. If you look at the MIG flash, if you and I listen to the song at the same time, the RIAA comes knocking on our door
Right.
because of the way that the system is set up. So the most responsible way to back up your stuff is using the MIG flash. And Nintendo somehow has a problem with that, which is ridiculous.
Yeah. Like the idea, so it's like, okay, I'm going to make a copy of the Switch game. I'm going to give it to a friend. Can you please not ever play that game? Because it's going to get me banned if we're playing at the same time.
Right.
That is the opposite of piracy right there. And I think that it's an effective anti-piracy measure. And for me, it's along the lines of just, okay, if I'm going to be playing this game that I've backed up myself, I got to make sure my kids aren't playing at the same time. That's all I have to do, and that's pretty easy. So
yeah.
Moving
on to more Nintendo news. Nintendo also went after Palworld, and I don't think we haven't recorded an episode since that happened, right? Okay, that's what I thought. I think that I can't speak for you guys, but I'm curious what you think. If I had said Nintendo is going after Palworld because of creature designs, would either of you be surprised?
No, I think it's, I've seen those infographics where it shows one versus the other, you know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, there's a lot of similarities. I've also seen those infographics where it shows Dragon Quest versus Pokemon, and it's like so close as well. But yeah.
Yeah, nobody would be surprised, and a lot of people would probably look at that and they would say, oh, that's justified. Like, they definitely ripped them off. And whether or not they ripped them off or Nintendo ripped off Dragon Quest first, or if it's just like, hey, that's based on a bird and you can't, like, they're both based on birds. Sure, whatever. I think a lot of people would look at that lawsuit and say, yep, makes sense. But Nintendo didn't go after Palworld for that. They went after them for patented gameplay mechanics, and we don't really know which mechanics. And I know that it's old news, but it looks like Nintendo is recently filing patents in the US now, not just in Japan. And they have a couple of things. So I just want to read this real quick, and then I want to get Rich's thoughts on this. So there's 2 patents that they're working on, US APP 3 and US APP 4. And one of them, it says, in first mode, causing a player to launch in the aiming direction. The way that they write this is so freaking weird. In the aiming direction, a catching item for catching a field character disposed on a field in a virtual space. So essentially throwing a ball at a Pokemon. That's what that thing says. Okay. And they didn't have this patent in the United States. They have that patent in Japan, but now they've applied to get it in the United States, and it's been rejected for lacking subject matter eligibility. But I guess that Nintendo can appeal for this. And if this is what they're going after, this is patenting gameplay mechanics, which I've always said is friggin' awful. Like, I hate the idea of gameplay mechanics getting patented. Rich, what do you think about this? Do you think because it's upheld in Japan, it's going to be also upheld here in the States? Or do you think that maybe the rejection is like a precursor to what might happen here?
Yeah, I read this PC Gamer piece and I was so confused. So like there's like, as part of like the research I've done for like other Nintendo and Valve lawsuits, I've read a lot of like legal documentation, and if I stare at it long enough, I can understand, like I can get to an understanding of what is happening. I read this and I think it's probably because it involves patents, and I was just like, what is going on? I have no idea, because the case is in Japan, but apparently PC Gamer thinks that this rejection for the US patent throws a wrench into the case in Japan, which does the US patent somehow have an effect on the case in Japan, or is it just the patent in Japan? So like that part is weird. I agree. I hate the notion of patenting game mechanics, and it's like patenting a brush stroke, right? Like it doesn't make sense to me. So I think it's a terrible idea. I think whether or not their case will be successful, there was a good article on 404 Media or 404 something, where a couple weeks ago, where they went through some of the patents that Nintendo has. But one of the things they said was that Nintendo has not lost a lawsuit that they initiated ever. So
right.
That is pretty damning. And, you know, a lot of those have ended in settlements of some sort, but the settlements typically seem in favor of Nintendo. So that, without knowing anything else, that alone is a little scary here.
Yeah, and then but the thing is they go after, what's the name of the Pocket Pair? You know, they're going after Pocket Pair for making Pokemon with guns. But I played World of Warcraft back in the day, and in World of Warcraft, they have pet battles, and it's essentially Pokemon. Like, you wander around in Azeroth in World of Warcraft, and there's a pet. You right-click on them, and it brings up a pet battle scenario, which is just like a Pokemon battle scenario. You wear them down, and then you throw a box at them, and the box has a chance to catch them. But they never went after Activision for that.
But do you think, because I saw you mention this in your video, and you're like talking about you know, because Blizzard is bigger, which is certainly a factor. But do you think that even in Pocket Pair's case that they care about the patent, or do you think this is just they're working around this? This is the way they're going to get at Pocket Pair for the creature design infringement, or what they perceive to be creature design infringement.
Right, just like they can't go after Russ for putting up a video about Mig Switch, so instead they're like, hey, he had 2 seconds of
exactly.
What was the game? Mario 3D Mario
World.
Or whatever?
3D World, yeah.
Yeah, Mario 3D. 2 seconds of 3D World, so we're going to hit him. Bye, babe. We're going to hit him for that. And we don't have to actually go after him for the thing that we're actually mad about.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And man, I always, you know, over the past 2 weeks, the biggest thing I've regretted is just not blurring out that one part. Like, it's just like, it's such a dumb move on my part, but whatever.
Well, I went through and I reached out to like my partner program, and I said, "Hey, can you make it so that my video where I talked about this is not available in Japan?" And they said, "Yep." And they made it so it's not available in Japan. So they said, "Do you want us to geo-block Japan for your entire channel?" I said, "No, not yet, but I've been thinking about it." Is that something you've thought about doing, Russ, or is that not something that you would want to do?
Oh no, I totally am trying to do that. The problem is I don't have an MCN like you. Like I don't have a partnership company that I like work with for sponsorship and whatnot. I'm on my own, and so that means I have to go through the YouTube Partner Program, which is like my guy at YouTube that I talk to once a month, whatever. And he has to go through basically copyright team to do that himself. It's like not a normal thing at all for just a YouTube employee to do it. It usually is the MCN that does it. And so people like Bob Wolf and you, I mean, you guys have the same MCN. And so it's like, you guys can get just a flick of the button. For me, it's like a several week process. So I'm working on it, but yeah. And I've looked through my, viewership and stuff, but 0.9% of one, less than 1% of my viewership comes from Japan. So it is a little bit of a hit, but not that much, and I feel bad for people in Japan who will no longer be able to watch my videos. But if you're watching my videos, you're tech savvy, which means you know how to watch videos. So I think it'll be fine.
Yeah, that's true. And this part of our podcast is brought to you by whatever, what's the
such
thing?
and such VPN.
Yeah,
NerdNest VPN.
So, yeah, I looked at my stats, and you're actually higher than me for Japan. Mine's 0.5, 0.5 of a percent. So it's very, very small. But there's a lot of videos that I make that aren't going to be affected by that. So I was like trying to decide if I wanted to or not. And at the end of the day, I decided I'm just going to wait because I'm from the future. I'm never putting Nintendo footage on any video that I talk about ever again. And I'm still going to talk about Nintendo stuff, but I will never put their footage, even when I'm praising them. That's the thing is like, if Russ was like saying, "Man, I love this game, 3D Mario and Bowser's World. It's such a great game, and these are all the reasons that I love it," Nintendo wouldn't have done a freaking thing about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's and to be clear too, the reason why we're doing this region blocking is there is precedence for it. So a lot of anime YouTubers do this. This is where it all got started, basically, because they were getting their videos copyright struck when they were making commentary videos about like Dragon Ball Z, for example. And so like Toei, who owns Dragon Ball Z, was coming after them and knocking out all their videos. And so they had to figure out a way of making that work. And so they figured out that blocking in Japan just kind of took it off the radar, even though there is like a Toei of America, like it didn't matter. It was the Japanese part of it that people were having issues with. And so that's what we're hoping. And by doing this, we're not trying to circumvent anything. And, I obviously realize there is a Nintendo of America, but it's not Nintendo of America who's sending me copyright strikes. It's Nintendo of Japan. And so that's just kind of one of the many avenues I'm trying to work through to try to clean everything up. And, yeah, it's weird. I'm working on a Switch video right now about a controller for the Switch, and I have to be like, just in the filming, I'm like so careful about it. I'm like, okay, even the front page, like when you turn on your Switch, you see like your last 5 games or whatever. I'm like going through and starting up a bunch of games, closing them out so that it's no Nintendo games showing. It's like Ubisoft games instead. And it's just to like be 100% safe that there's no Mario even showing on my Switch, my regular Switch, where I'm just doing an accessory video. And so, yeah, it's one of those. It's just really kind of crazy that I'm having to do that. But at this point, I don't know. There's no clear roadmap to any of this stuff. There's no rules that I'm seeing from Nintendo saying, "Hey, this is where you cross the line," And so it's just a funky place to be.
Yep.
I was watching one of your videos where you were doing your pocket test on something, and Super Mario Brothers 2 was on the screen behind you, and I was like, "Oh no, he's gonna get got."
And my CRT. I know I got these pillows behind me with like Mario on them. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Got to replace those with Sonic or something, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on away from Nintendo because it's depressing. Let's talk about boy,
What are you going to find that's less depressing?
I don't know.
None of these topics are,
I know, they're all bad. It's all bad news today. Bad news bears. Hey, man, just finished the thumbnail. How long before you're done with the video? Oh, hey, man, I'm going to need a couple more days. I gave you all the footage like 2 days ago. What's taking so long? I'm exhausted. I have been working on this video for I don't even know how long. Last night I got no sleep, It was hot, and then it was cold, and then it was freaking hot again. I could not get comfortable. I tossed and turned all night. I got no sleep, and it is slowing me down. Well, if you're having trouble sleeping because you can't get the temperature right, then I suggest you check out Miracle Sheets. Nighttime bedroom temperatures can have a huge impact on your sleep quality. If you're too hot or if you're too cold, check out Miracle Made Sheets. They use fabrics that are temperature regulating so that you can fall asleep fast, and more importantly, you can stay asleep all night long. Traditional bed sheets have lots of bacteria, which can lead to acne, allergies, and it's just gross. Miracle Made has a whole line of sheets that prevent 99.7% of bacteria growth, and they require up to 3 times less laundry. Plus, they're really comfortable without the high price tag of other brands, and they feel great. Stop sleeping on bacteria. Sleep clean with Miracle. Go to trymiracle.com/nerd to try Miracle Made Sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for somebody that you care about, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use promo code NERD at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's back with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you're not satisfied, you can get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/nerd and use code NERD to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/nerd to treat yourself. Big thanks to Miracle Made for sponsoring this episode. So let's take a look at the Horizon Zero Dawn, which a lot of people... it got announced that PlayStation was doing a remaster, and they were like, "Well, they're already doing a remaster." And then it was like, "Hey, it's only $10 to upgrade your version," and everybody's like, "Oh, okay, that sounds
I
pretty
stand
reasonable."
by my dumb boy voice, so you
What's
can just
your
say
dumb boy
it's...
voice? Let's hear it.
No, my dumb voice. You just did my dumb voice. You were mimicking me because I said that I don't like that they're doing a remaster. I don't know why you did that, but
Why don't you like that they're doing a remaster? Let's fight.
I don't actually. Let's fight. I don't actually dislike it. I don't think it's... So first of all, I think that the $10 upgrade path, which is what I was saying before we knew what the deal was back when this leaked, I was like, yeah, if this is a $10 upgrade path, no big deal. That's pretty cool. I like it. Do I think that what I saw in that trailer was like, yes, I need to go spend that $10 so that I can get the best Horizon Zero Dawn experience possible? I'm like, it's whatever. Like it doesn't excite me. It's just there. So if I play Horizon Zero Dawn, I suppose that I'm going to want the best possible experience. So I will probably get that, but it's not like it's not something I think like, yeah, this was a great use of your investment. It's just kind of there. And outside of that, I mean, like, we've seen these state of plays, right? Like where there hasn't been a ton of exciting stuff. There have been some good Sony games, right? Or at least PlayStation exclusive games like Stellar Blade, FF7 Rebirth. So there have been it's been a good year for PlayStation, but a lot of these like state of plays and things like that have not been terribly exciting. So for Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered to be one of the bigger things, thankfully there was Ghost of Yotei, but for that to be one of the bigger things, I was like, okay, fine.
I feel like this is not for people who want to play the game. I feel like this is for people who want to watch Digital Foundry, because then they can put them side by side and be like, look at how much nicer it looks when you pause it and zoom in and you look at how you count up the pixels. Like,
yeah, to be fair,
okay.
that is my problem, right? Like, is that I love Digital Foundry videos.
Me too.
When I play whatever FF7 Rebirth and I play it on, if they were comparing two machines and I compare it on one machine and the other machine, like it's few more pixels. Like it's not something that I'm really thinking about. I'm just enjoying the game.
Right.
So I'm just one of those people. So I have to accept that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Horizon Forbidden West on PS5 is an excellent example for me, because that game in particular, every time I boot it up, I'm just like, whoa, like it looks so cool. The kids will walk into the room and be like, whoa, because they're just used to seeing a Switch game, right? And so they see me playing that sometimes and they're just like, holy crap, that's like real life, But I tell you, 2 minutes into it, I'd never notice again. I'm looking at my character, I'm looking at the gameplay, like I'm just doing all the things that you do when you play a game. I never even think about it. And so yeah, I'm definitely not pushing towards the pixels, but I think that for $10, I'm totally going to upgrade it. The thing that I thought was hilarious about this Horizon Zero Dawn thing is that it's been a $20 game for years, right? Like it's been a $20 game forever, and then they got this $10 upgrade path. You're like, oh, great, you can get the remastered one for $30. No, they immediately up the price to $40, and so now this $20 game somehow now it costs $40, and I think that's just.
That's
I
shady.
get why Sony did it, right? Because there's the loophole there. But holy crap, that just looked really like consumer unfriendly, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, I mean, it doesn't end there, Russ, because now the PC version of Horizon Zero Dawn is now delisted. You can no longer buy it at all, and you can only pre-order the remastered version, and the remastered version requires the PSN sign-in. So, like, part of me is like, is this the real reason that they're doing the remaster? Is just so that they can say, we already have new kinematics for Aloy because of Horizon Forbidden West. If we put that tech that we developed for the sequel into the original, charge an extra $10, and then yank the game so that if people want to play this, they have to sign into PSN so we can get those email addresses and we can go to a shareholder meeting and say we increased our reach or our user base by this % because of this, and stock number goes up. That's what I'm thinking is happening here. Maybe I'm just being too cynical. What do you think, Rich?
I think the fact that you can even come up with that idea just means that Sony has been on the wrong path of this, right? With their PSN requirement. I've mentioned them a few times now. It just feels rushed, but also at the same time intentional, right? So they've rushed through it, and they've seen the problems with rushing through it, and they're still marching forward. They haven't had any pause. They've just said, you know what? Yeah, let's keep going, because like they didn't seem prepared for the country thing where like, oh, actually we don't support PSN in these regions, so now we have to block this game in these regions. Sorry about that. So they didn't seem prepared for that, and their solution to that was to just stop selling it in those countries and not ever go back to it. And so like they just keep marching forward, and they don't seem to have a plan for this. They're just, we want this to happen, and we're going to make it happen.
It reminds me a lot of, 2 tours ago when I was in the Navy. So 2 before my last one, before I retired, I worked for a 3-star admiral. I think I mentioned it on this channel before, but like, there were 10 layers between me and him. And I would sit in meetings with this admiral, and he'd be like, hey, wouldn't it be great if we had more Sony PlayStation signups? He just had like a thought like that. Like, it would be great if we had more of those, like looking at the stats or whatever, and so someone presented it to him. And so he makes a comment like that. And then those 10 rungs of people just start coming like with all these ideas, and everyone starts to forget the original vision of the Admiral, which was just like, hey, this is what I was thinking about. And it turns into this, right? Where it's like, oh, well, he said that, let's put in more signups. Oh, but this is going to result in a lot fewer sales because we can't sell it in this country anymore. He said more signups, so we got to do everything we can, right? And they're going to sabotage everything along the way to get to this one thing. And then the Admiral's going to sit there and be like, why aren't we selling this game in Brazil? Like, what is going on here? And so that's kind of what I see this happening, is that those rungs of layers, especially Sony's a Japanese company, and they also have that kind of bureaucratic hierarchy kind of thing going. And so I can just see this, as a guy who spent, almost 23 years in this kind of stuff. That's kind of the feeling that I'm getting from this, is that everyone's trying to please the Admiral without doing the thing he actually asked for.
And the thing that drives me batty is clearly they've heard that people were pissed off about this. It would be so easy for them to solve by saying, you know what? We're going to make PSN available in these countries. We have work to do. We have contracts to work out. We have to make sure that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's and making sure that we're following the laws in those countries. But we'll bring PSN to those countries. So if you bought these games, or if you want to buy these games, you'll be able to. I don't have a problem with Sony making a launcher. I don't give a shit. No, like, who cares? It doesn't matter. Yeah. We all have 1,000 things that we sign up for. It's one more click. It really doesn't matter. the reason that people don't like it is because they can't play the game that they paid for in these countries. There's also other reasons why we don't like it when it comes to, not working on Linux or something like that. But those are very few people. Most people who are upset by this are probably in one of those countries, or they're unreasonable people who just want to be mad about stuff.
Yeah, totally.
That happens too.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of the PSN sign-up, we have God of War. God of War required that you had the PSN, and then somebody made a mod over at Nexus Mods called No PS SDK for that game, which basically made it so that you didn't have to sign in. And then eventually they were like, you know what? This is getting too much attention. I don't like the idea that Sony could get mad at me. So they voluntarily took it off of Nexus Mods.
Oh, is that what happened? They voluntarily took it off?
That's my understanding of it from what I read. But I could be wrong about that.
I won't doubt it. I remember seeing that it was taken off of Nexus, and I think I just assumed that it was a DMCA from Sony.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But what do you think about that, though, Rich? The fact that do you think that it was a bad idea from the start, and was it needed? And because, like, you told me that you don't even have to really worry about it, right?
On Linux. So this is the PSN for God of War Ragnarok, right? So like on Steam Deck, it's disabled entirely. On Linux, you can pass a command launch option to say, I'm a Steam Deck. And so the game will think you're a Steam Deck, and then it won't launch the PSN launcher because on Steam Deck, it's not enabled at all. On Windows, I don't know if you could pass. I assume you can't pass. I've never tried that same exact launch option. I think there is like an is Steam Deck launch option even in Windows. But I don't know the extent to what Sony, like, did they check for Linux or anything like that? So it's possible that didn't work in Windows, hence the Nexus mod. As for like a good idea to take it down, I understand trying to dodge the heat from corporations right now. I can get yeah, exactly. I can get along with that idea of trying to dodge heat right this moment.
It seems weird that they would even make it, though. Like, why make it and then turn around and turn it off? Like, it just seems like a weird choice to me.
Why put 2 seconds of Super Mario 3D World in your video?
That's true.
You know what I mean?
That's true. But yeah, I don't know. Russ. Maybe once it's out there, right? So maybe like if I wanted to still use no PS SDK, I probably could still find it.
Probably. None of this stuff ever really goes away.
Yeah.
Right.
But what needs to go away is AAA gaming has got to change. It's not often that I agree with things that oh my God, I forgot. Tim
Sweeney.
Thank you. I couldn't remember his name for some reason. It's not often that I agree with things that Tim Sweeney said, but he was talking over at I found this over at PC Gamer, and he said one of the manifestations we're seeing right now is that a lot of games are released with high budgets and they're not selling nearly as well as expected, whereas other games are going incredibly strong. What we're seeing is a real trend where players are gravitating towards really big games where they can play with more of their friends. So he's talking about Fortnite, obviously. Yeah. But he is not wrong about the idea of these games with absolutely massive budgets, and then not enough people are buying them. Final Fantasy, like Square recently was saying, boy, Final Fantasy didn't perform the way that we wanted it to. With their expectations were way too high, and their budgets were way too high. We had, what's the Star Wars one?
Outlaws.
Yeah, Star Wars Outlaws sold 1 million copies. 1 million. That's crazy. And it's a very expensive game to make. And like we have these games that are just super expensive to make. Ubisoft trying to shoehorn in quadruple A games. And people just aren't buying them as much because people keep playing the same games over and over and over. If Kerry was here, he'd be talking about his kid playing Roblox because it's always that same thing. Do you think that AAA gaming, or according to Ubisoft, quadruple A gaming, is in big trouble right now. What do you think, Rich?
I'm going to defer to Russ because I really like his take on this, and I don't want to say it before he says it. So I'm going to give it up to Russ.
I don't know if I'm going to have the same take. I think I said it before, but it's like, that new movie from Scorsese or whoever that just came out, not Scorsese, the other guy.
Megalopolis?
Yeah, that's the one.
Megalopolis, right? How much did that cost? That was like 150 million, or I'm making the numbers up. But I know he spent a bunch of his own personal money. He sold his own vineyard to like pay for it, all this stuff, right? And it is one of the biggest flops of all time. And I still think that there is a place for blockbuster, like big tentpole movies. Like one failure is not going to shape the industry. There's always going to be indie movies that do really well. There's going to be indie movies that do not. And same thing with gaming, you know what I mean? And whether or not companies are going to be willing to invest more, I don't know. I have a buddy who works for a large gaming company. He doesn't work in the development side, but he works in the acquisition side. So he basically, he finds smaller projects and then takes them under their larger umbrella, gives them capital, and then helps them to basically achieve success in that game. So he's focused on little stuff. But, he talks all the time about this game got canceled. This game we were working on and we got like 60% of the way there, didn't even tell anyone about, it's gone. It's a very common thing in the games industry. But there is a point where you just get to the point where you're like, all right, we've put so much money into this thing, we just got to release it. It's not very often you see like the Batgirl movie where they basically finish that and then just can it. That's not super common. Usually what will happen is they get to a point where like, all right, we've invested so much money, we're just going to put it out and see how much money we can get back, And I think that maybe games like Outlaws or, something like that where, where they put a lot of money into it, they maybe knew it wasn't going to be like a milestone game in terms of just changing the whole industry, but they're like, we'll at least get more money as opposed to just cannexing it at this point. And so, yeah, that's kind of my take on it. It's just that, I don't see the industry changing in any way. These things have always happened throughout history. The numbers change, things get more expensive or whatever, but it's always just how it's going to be, I think. So.
Yeah, I like that take because I am someone that tends to think like, oh, wow, we're on the brink of like some sort of major shift happening because of all of this. And you say that, and I'm like, yeah, no, that's true. Like we've had so many big movie failures, and then we have, the huge like fast movies that come out or whatever it is, the Avengers at the time, whatever it is that just hits the scene like, and nobody could have predicted, just still happens. And so will that continue to happen for gaming? I imagine so. I think, I do think we're at a point now where, like we've said it so many times, we have so many games, right? Like we have more games than we can ever know what to do with. So like each individual game has to work harder to convince me to buy it. And I think that's the case for a lot of other people. You have to work harder to convince me to buy it. I am of course surprised by Outlaws only selling 1 million. That is, that is specifically like really strange. Concord in its failure, I'm not surprised it failed. I'm surprised by how badly it failed. I would have expected a few more people to buy it than reportedly did. Same thing with Star Wars Outlaws. I'm not necessarily surprised that it didn't stick the landing, but I'm surprised by how far that gap is. Just being a Star Wars property, right? You would expect it to sell some amount there.
The other thing about that too, that I just cut in real quick, is that going back to the movies thing, and by the way, it was Francis Ford Coppola, I forgot the name. But anyway, so going back to the movies thing, often I will see a movie come out and I'll be like, I'm going to wait for DVD, right? You're like, I'm going to get it cheaper. I don't want to go and spend the whole family all that money and that kind of stuff. That's the same way I saw with Outlaws. I'm like, I'm going to play this game when it is $20. But with something like Concord, they're like, no, you can't even buy it on DVD. Like they're not even giving us the opportunity to wait till it's cheaper. They're just basically cutting it right then and there. And so that's just another parallel that I'm seeing is these companies are taking initial release as being whether or not a success or not. And I don't agree. I think that some games they just need to hit the right price point, and some of these aren't given the opportunity to do so. Anyway,
agreed.
Or
100% agreed.
Be in all the stores, because Star Wars Outlaws on PC is only on Ubisoft Plus, I think. Or not Ubisoft. What's it called?
Ubisoft Connect. And
thank you.
I think it's also on Epic Game Store. Yes, it is. So it's just not on Steam, basically.
Right. And if it's not on Steam, it doesn't exist for a lot of people.
For sure. Yeah.
You were still talking about something though, Rich.
Yeah, sorry, Rich.
No, you're good, and I agree with all of that. I think with Ubisoft in particular, like I have so many thoughts, and maybe we'll get to that with some of the other stuff going on. But like, basically, my thought process is for that, like, they lost their moat, right? And what I mean by that is
Moat?
they moat, like a castle
Around
has
a castle?
moat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So like when they have occasions where they don't stick the landing, they no longer have like hardcore core fans, right? Like we went from happy with Ubisoft at some point, collectively, right? Not necessarily the specific people. Collectively, we were happy with Ubisoft, and then we were mad at Ubisoft, right? And so like that meant that we were complaining. But the opposite of love isn't hate, right? It's
Indifference. Yeah.
right? So like now, years later, years after they had all of their missteps, most of us are just indifferent to Ubisoft. So that's what I mean by they lost their moat. Like they don't have like a bunch of hardcore fans that are going to be like, yes, I'm going to play this regardless of what it is because it's Ubisoft. So I think that's the main thing for them is that they just, most people are indifferent. So you really have to stick the landing and it really has to be a good game.
Another great point to this is that it's not just the Ubisoft moat, it's the Star Wars moat. Like we are tired of Star Wars. We have gotten oversaturated, you know what I mean? And so they thought, oh, Star Wars is going to sell like gangbusters, but man, I've had enough Star Wars lately, you know? And so that's another thing that they probably didn't predict when they were first, you know, creating this game or at least signing up for it.
Agreed.
Yeah, like just on the Star Wars topic, you mentioned like being sick of Star Wars. I am a huge Star Wars fan. Right behind my monitors right here is a poster for the original A New Hope. I bought
Wearing a shirt.
Years ago. Yeah, oh, it's that same shirt. Yeah, it is. But it's on my wall. I bought the NPR radio drama of the Star Wars movies where they had brought in actors and some of the original actors, and they recorded a radio drama, and I bought it on CD from like a million years ago, and it's still here. It might actually be in storage in on the other side of that wall, but like I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and when they brought back when the Mandalorian came out, I was like, hell yes, this stuff is amazing. Mm-hmm. And I just we watched the Acolyte. Is that the name of the new one? The Acolyte. Mm-hmm. And there were some things that I really liked in that, but there were other things that were real bad. Like some of it was amazing. The good stuff was really good, and the bad stuff was really bad, and it wasn't anything like really in the middle. Yeah. And I was not enjoying it. My wife and I like to watch the Marvel stuff. We're watching Agatha all along. Last night I turned to her and I said, this is the worst episode of anything that Marvel has put out yet. And it feels like there's like this, I don't know if I'm changing or if they're just not putting in the effort. And that's what it feels like for being sick of Star Wars. That's what it, and you know, there's all of these people who are like, oh, it failed because it's woke. Those people drive me up the wall. Yeah. If a game is bad, they'll say it's bad because it's woke. If a game is good, they'll say it's good because it's not woke. And if they called it woke and then it turned out to be good, they'll make up some reason to explain away why it still succeeded.
So you mean Baldur's Gate 3 isn't woke?
Baldur's Gate 3 is super woke, and it succeeded like gangbusters because it's a freaking great game. And like these grifters just drive me up the wall. And I'm going to get a bunch of people in the comments yelling at me. I don't care. Stop listening to the grifters because that's what they're doing. But that's just me saying it. That's not Rich saying it.
Some of them are releasing very great games that will be out very soon, I'm sure.
But I'm not speaking for these guys. So don't get mad at them. Feel free to be mad at me. Anyway, so you brought up Ubisoft. We might as well talk about Ubisoft. They might be getting acquired by Tencent. This is
no. Tencent are part of it's Tencent and Ubisoft are both considering a buyout. Tencent already owns part of Ubisoft.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. Okay, so talk about this a little bit then.
Yeah, so let me double check that last part. But basically, so Ubisoft. Last I checked, it was like 49.9% owned by Tencent, but that stat may be old. and so they may have sold some shares since then. But nonetheless, they at least have some ownership. But the point is, their share price has dropped tremendously, like down to a 10-year low, partially due to Star Wars Outlaws, partially due towards like some of the lack of excitement towards Assassin's Creed Shadows, at least what they were expecting, I think. And then like Star Wars Outlaws is like the end of a number of badly received titles, right? Like there was Avatar, there was Skull and Bones, which like was pretty much predicted to be a failure. Like they seemed like they had to put it out regardless of how bad the game was. So like there's Avatar, Skull and Bones, and now this Star Wars Outlaws, and just nothing has been hitting the way they've been expecting things to hit. And so 10-year dip, 10-year low on the share price. And there's been a lot of investors that have been pushing for Yves Guillemot to step down. So basically they want new leadership. And they're also threatening to basically allow some sort of hostile takeover. So in lieu of that, Yves Guillemot is looking, and leadership are looking to sell potentially Ubisoft. And
Interesting.
And maybe Tencent that's going to buy the rest of it. But one thing I will say before I turn it over to you guys is, I don't think there's a happy ending here, right? Like, like
right.
I don't.
Tencent's too big. Keep going.
Tencent's huge. And whoever can afford to buy Ubisoft would be huge. And like, it's just going to, like, all of these IP are going to get lost in the sauce. And so like, I don't think there's a happy ending here, but I also don't think that Ubisoft leadership has a good track record. Like my experience, as I did my research for a video that I'm doing now, is that like Ubisoft had a good run, like a 10-ish year run, but they've been around since the late 70s, early 80s. And like, you think about game companies that have been around since the early 80s, Taito, Activision, Atari, Midway, you could fill a museum with their games from 1980 to 1995. Try to think of a Ubisoft game from 1980 to 1995. I would be surprised if you could think of one.
First I can think of is like Beyond Good and Evil. Like I can't even think of games before that, like before PS2 era.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are some. I'm looking it up. Yeah.
So they acquired Prince of Persia in 2001. They acquired Red Storm in 2000, Prince of Persia in 2001. And that sort of kicked off their good run. Right. And I think they're just very business oriented. They're not like gaming oriented, which you need both. And so I think that's kind of where we are with Ubisoft in my opinion.
I feel like they just spend. Like they just put way too much money into it. And like the thing that I've heard you say a million times, Rich, we want shorter games with worse graphics that are cheaper. And like, I agree with that. And there's obviously, we're saying with worse graphics, not because we want worse graphics, but because we don't care so much about the graphical fidelity. We care more about the fun gameplay.
Yeah, assuming you have to spend the money somewhere, I would rather you spend it on being innovative. I would rather you spend it on iterating on the gameplay than spend it on the graphics.
Yeah, the only game I forgot was Rayman. So I remember Rayman from like PS1. So that's like the oldest Ubisoft I remember.
1995.
So you said they've been around since the 80s. What was like what's their first game?
Looking through.
I've never heard of it. Yeah. Like, I don't know.
So you know what's funny? I found Zombie U, the Wii game.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. They
Careful,
have
Nintendo.
they published and developed Zombie U, but they have a game called Zombie from like 1981, 1982.
Yeah, I was seeing that.
Oh, yeah. So that's an IP that they've had since 1981, and I had no idea. They do have some notable games. I want to say, is it Defender of the Crown? Is that the name of that game?
It looked like it was a different development team though. Oh no, that's them. That is them. Yeah. I remember that game.
They have a number of games that are like somewhat notable in the history of computer gaming, but not enough to fill up like a compilation like these other guys that I'm saying. And then they have a lot of games that they published in like Europe only. I think Anno may be a game that they published in European countries during the 90s or something like that. But they don't have a lot of like in-house developed until you get to Rayman in 1995.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I like the first. I never played Rayman. I eventually played one of them, and I was like, I don't really like this very much. It's not for me, and that's fine.
Yeah.
The first thing that I really remember from Ubisoft is Assassin's Creed. Like that's the thing that jumps out at me. That's what they make. They make Assassin's Creed. The first Assassin's Creed came out. Everybody was like, hey, this is really cool, but super repetitive. And so I never played it. And then I did not, I bought an Assassin's Creed game. I don't remember which one because I never friggin' opened it. And then I eventually played Valhalla and I was like, oh, this is really cool. I like this game. This is neat. So like, to me, they're just like the Assassin's Creed team. And I don't really play many of those. And then almost forgot about the Division. I do like the Division games. Like those ones are cool. And Rainbow Six Siege is also a fun game. But like Ubisoft has never been something, like you said, that they had rabid fan bases. I like, really? That surprised me.
Yeah, the extent that they would have had is specifically Assassin's Creed and Tom Clancy's games and maybe Far Cry games. Like those are the
Oh yeah, forget about
franchises.
Far Cry.
Yeah, so like those are the ones that like would have built-in audience. And I mean, like Rainbow Six and Ghost Recon, like those games during the early 360 years, man, they were the ones. Like those were a lot of fun. And so like they could have built a large base around that. I think, you know, for them, they probably ended up chasing trends with like Call of Duty and Battlefield and stuff like that. And in my opinion, those games lost their identity until we got back to like Siege and stuff like that. But yeah, that's my thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, for my own taste, like I put a lot of goodwill into Ubisoft after Assassin's Creed 2 in particular. Like I own basically all of the Assassin's Creeds after that, and I've never played any of them, but it's like, oh, I'll get to it someday, you know, but then I just hear that it's not the same experience. And so, but that shows me just as a gamer, like I got a lot of respect for that franchise based on Assassin's Creed 1 and 2, basically.
And everybody that I've
so
talked
good.
to have always said, yeah, exactly what Rich just said. 2 is so good. Everybody always says how fantastic that game is. And I'm just like you, Russ. I'm like, oh, I'll get to it eventually. The one that I have that's still sealed on the PS4, it's a sealed copy of whichever the pyramid one is that has pyramids on it. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I bought it and it sat on my shelf and I was like, I'm going to get to it someday. Rich, what's a game that you bought that you've just never got around to? Just like one.
Near Automata. I love Platinum games. I definitely want to beat that game, and like one of the things is that I have heard that it has like multiple endings and like you have to beat the game multiple times to really get it. So maybe that's been daunting to me. But yeah, that's a big one. Is that like that's one I should have beaten by now, but I haven't.
Anything other than Assassin's Creed there, Russ?
There are so many that I can't count. I think Spider-Man is probably like the biggest one. Like I am stuck in one spot an hour or two into the game and I've just been there for years, you know, and I use it for my game testing. It's just going around Manhattan, you know, but like I want to play Miles Morales. I want to play Spider-Man 2, but man, like to get there, that's a lot of work and I just haven't never got there.
I will say for you, Russ, you may be delighted to know, if you don't know already, all the Spider-Man games have excellent like difficulty sliders. So like you can turn down everything, combat, puzzles, whatever you want to turn down, you can turn it down.
Yeah. No, I have noticed that, and yeah, it's been great.
I played Spider-Man, not much of it. Probably about the same amount as you. Like I fought Kingpin at the beginning of the first thing, and then I went exploring in the city and did a couple of things. I can't even really remember what. I don't like the controls in that game. Like it feels weird to me when I'm playing. Like I can't remember how it plays, but I remember when I was playing it thinking, oh, my brain wants to do a different thing, and I keep having to press the button that my brain doesn't like pressing to do this. Like it's not how I would have designed the controls, and that's why I end up putting it down. But then like my son will come and talk to me. He's like, you got to play Spider-Man, and he's 100%ed the first one, the second one, and the Miles Morales. Like, he's got the platinum trophies on his PlayStation, and he's like, oh, they're so good, and that's what everybody always says, and I'm always like, oh yeah, I'm going to,
Yeah.
and then I never do.
I definitely have the platinum for the first. I may have the platinum for the Miles, but I haven't finished 2 yet. I do love those games, and they continued the Arkham legacy for me, right? So like, even there are times where it feels like just like filler gameplay, but it's filler gameplay that is like tailored to me, right? Like, it doesn't matter that this is just the same mission that I did 2 minutes ago. I love this gameplay, so I just do it, and I can just relax that way. So,
Gotta find all those backpacks.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, so Valve, they lost some kind of court case, or they had a strategy. They backfired on them, and I made a video when I talked about this, and I didn't quite understand it. I looked at it as Valve changed the rules. They have a pop-up that showed up, and it was like, hey, we're changing our subscription agreement. Click yes or else. So, everybody clicks yes because we don't want our accounts to go away. And previously, the agreement was you can't sue us. If you want to sue us, it just goes to arbitration instead. And that was costing Valve $3,000 per arbitration. And so a bunch of arbiters, I don't know how you would say that.
Let me, I'll help you out. So
thank you.
Yes. So Wolfire, this stems all the way back to the Wolfire thing. So Wolfire started a class action lawsuit against Valve. And as far as I understand, they were the first ones, because there are a number of like legal actions against Valve. I think
that's over in England, right?
No, the Wolfire case is here. I don't know if Wolfire is based in England. They may be, but the case is here, I want to say. Yeah, it is. So they started a case here. It's a class action. It was on behalf of developers and consumers. And so Valve filed a motion in the court to compel arbitration based on their existing subscriber agreement. The motion passed for consumers, but not for developers. So the class action continued for developers, but the consumers could no longer be a part of that class action. So they couldn't sue Valve because they had to go through arbitration. So like, there is a tactic called mass arbitration. So knowing that this tactic is a thing, other law firms, 3 or more law firms, basically took on these consumers as clients. They started up websites to like gather tens of thousands of consumers as clients so that they can initiate arbitration with each of these clients all at once with Valve. And yeah, it cost them, I think you said $3,000. I think that's correct. $3,000 approximately to initiate an arbitration, an individual arbitration, because they have to pay these fees up front to the arbitration provider. So Valve hires the arbitration provider, but it's like, I'm sure they pay some sort of retainer, but in addition to that, they're paying this $3,000 to the provider. So these law firms are using that as leverage and trying to get a settlement out of Valve. Valve says no, and they go forward with the arbitration, right? And so that is why they had to update the subscriber agreement to now say, we are not going to force you through arbitration. You can now sue us.
Right. But the disadvantage is if you sue them, you have to go to state or federal court located in King County, Washington. So if Russ decides to sue him, he can't sue him from Hawaii. He has to sue him through King County, Washington. And that makes it harder to sue them. So what initially sounded like, oh, Valve's making it so that it's easier for you to sue them, it actually seems like it's making it harder.
They're going
right?
It's easier than it was before, because you literally could not sue them before.
Right.
I don't know, but I feel like this is still better than forced arbitration. But is it good guy Gabe? No. This is still just a company acting in their best interest, for sure.
Which is, I always say this and people always get mad at me. Valve is not a good guy. Valve usually does nice things because it's in their best interest. And people always get mad at me when I say that because they love Valve. Like they have this weird parasocial relationship with Valve, just like some people have a weird parasocial relationship with Nintendo where they're like, I love Nintendo. Nintendo is my friend. I love Valve. Valve's my friend. No, they're companies. And sometimes they do good stuff and sometimes they do bad stuff. And when they do good stuff, we should say, hey, nice job. And when they do bad stuff, we should say, hey, screw you. And people will always say, yay, good stuff. And they'll never say bad stuff. Like, how many times have you put out a video, Rich, and people are mad at you because you take Valve to task for something that they did that wasn't as cool as other things?
I'm pretty sure the only time I get below, and this is very like YouTube thing, but like the only time I get below 95% like ratio is whenever I have any sort of criticism towards Valve. If I say anything critical of Valve, it will dip below 75%. So, or excuse me, 95%. So Bill, expect this video to dip below 95%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The thing is, the pendulum swings both ways too. You know, I've seen a lot of just hate for Nintendo, like just unbridled hate, you know, and I understand that, you know, and Bill and I had a bit of a conversation about, boycotting Nintendo, specifically in one of your videos, right, where someone came out and said like, you have to boycott or you're not a friend of Russ, you know, kind of thing. And I replied to that commenter and I was like, listen, I'm not going to boycott Nintendo myself. I'm going to buy the Switch 2 and review it like any other handheld, good and bad, you know. And they're like, oh, that means you're not allowed to complain about them then if you're going to fully support them. And I'm like, fully supporting is very different from buying a piece of hardware and reviewing it for my channel. You know what I mean? Like there are things that Analog and Asus and other people have dbrand do that I just do not like. You know what I mean?
That is the thing.
But I will still buy their stuff and review it because it informs other people to make their own buying decisions, and that's kind of my job. Anyway, what were you gonna say, Rich?
No, that's the thing. Like you have been on here on this podcast criticizing, not criticizing in a bad way, offering critique towards your own, to the person to the organization that paid you, right? Like like the military, the Navy, right? Like you've offered critique towards that, right? And I'm sure everyone out there that's watching this does not feel 100% positive feelings about their employer, right? But you still work there.
Yeah, exactly.
Same for me, right? Like there are things that I would criticize my company for. Overall on the net, I like them very much, but there are things I would say. And so like, I think criticism is great. And I even think like boycotting could be valuable, right? I think what's interesting is that like we have a lot of negative sentiment towards collective action, but we like what I want to call collective individual action, right? We like when we want to vote with our wallets, and we want everybody to vote with their wallets the same way we are voting with our wallets. Like that's what we want. And so like, I'm like that's sort of a boycott, but I think what people miss from a boycott is that there should be clear demands, right? Like, here's what we're going to do until this happens, because otherwise, you know, what is in it for Nintendo to change, or in it for whoever to change, if we don't one day get back to buying their games or buying their hardware?
Yeah. And I think that putting your head in the sand and ignoring a company does its own thing, right? Monetarily, it has a consequence, but it's never going to inspire that company to make a change, because they're not going to hear the feedback and the criticisms that may eventually get there, you know? And so it's one of those things, you know, when I was in the military, I was like, I'm joining for 4 years and I'm out. Like, I made decisions in that 4-year period that affected my later career because I was planning on getting out. And so I was like, no, I'm not signing up for that thing. I'm gone, you know? Sure enough, I stayed. But one of the reasons why I stayed was like, I'm like, you know, there are things I don't like about this military industrial complex, and the only way I can change it is from within. And so that was one of my major factors, was like, I'm going to actually see what I can do within this and fix it from, you know, giving my own feedback as somebody who knows what we're talking about within it, you know? And so I see it as the same way, you know, like yes, boycotting has its own effect, especially just if I was a straight up user, like I totally get that. But for us with a platform, like there is the knowledge that you need to be able to fix things. And I think that reviewing a Super Switch is my wheelhouse. That's something that I could probably give insights into that others may not. And so, I'm going to do that.
Yeah. Can I shout out something real quick?
Yeah.
We've mentioned it on this podcast before, but like just in the spirit of like changing things, right? Like the Stop Killing Games action has been very cool to see. And yeah, it's imperfect. And like famously Thor from Pirate Software, but Thor, the YouTuber, has like given critique to Stop Killing Games, and so hopefully it gets even better. But I think that sort of action, that sort of like chasing regulation, is just awesome effort and stuff, good stuff to see.
Totally.
So Russ has said he's not going to boycott Nintendo, and I said in my video I'm not going to boycott Nintendo. Rich, are you going to boycott Nintendo?
If you think I'm not buying the Switch 2, and
you're not a good friend to Russ.
If you think my kids are not going right, everybody hang up now. I'm getting the Switch 2. I mean, yeah.
Super Switch. We don't want Carrie busted in here. So, I mean, look, the way I see it is if you want to boycott Nintendo because you don't like what they're doing, or if you want to boycott Ubisoft or Valve or PlayStation, whatever it is, if you're mad at a company and you decide I'm not going to pay them any more money, I totally understand. But to say that, you're a bad person if you don't boycott this, I think that that's ridiculous. And I also am going to be buying the Super Switch or the Switch 2 or whatever it is that Nintendo calls it, the Switch U. Whatever they call it, I'm probably going to buy one because I love Nintendo games. Like, they make really good games. There's a reason why I've been playing Nintendo games my whole life. Their games are really fun.
Yeah, and I'll add, like, if there was a groundswell of like, let's take this action until Nintendo changes this, and I agreed with whatever that was, I would absolutely join that, right? Like, if we say, let's not buy any Nintendo games or any Nintendo hardware until Nintendo stops copyright striking YouTube videos, and we stuck with that, I would join that cause, sure. But
the thing is like, there's so many people that don't even know about this stuff. Yeah, like most people who play the Nintendo Switch, they have no idea that Nintendo is copyright striking. If I walk down the street and ask a random person, are you aware of what copyright striking is? Most people would be like, what are you talking about? Yeah. Like, we live in this bubble and so many people feel like, oh, everybody knows this stuff. Most people don't. Like, we're the minority of people that know this stuff.
Yeah, which is why I think YouTubers talking about it, like Russ was saying, like that's his role, right? Like, is I can be someone that talks about these things, and Richard, I can make a video about like Russ being struck down, or Theo, the software content creator, can make a video about Russ being struck down, and Moist Critical. So like, this becoming a topic of discussion is good because now it's getting exposure. So like, if that somehow creates a groundswell, I'm here for it.
Yeah. Good job, Russ.
Yeah. I honestly, I was getting texts from friends who just knew I had a channel, but not, no one who actually is in it or whatever. And they were like, hey, you were on the front page of Reddit. I read an article and then I saw your name on it, and so it definitely did get more exposure than normal in terms of just, how this is all playing out. And I think that that's kind of that Streisand effect that honestly is probably most in our favor. When we try to break out into like a mainstream kind of conversation, that's great.
Right. And every time Nintendo does this, it seems to draw attention to the fact that you can emulate Switch games on other hardware, where most people would be like, oh, that never would have occurred to me.
Yeah. And the more compelling part of the entire conversation, too, is the fact that I do love Nintendo games and that I am a huge fan and that I want to share that joy, and I cannot. Right. That's the story. Not that, oh, a YouTuber is going to boycott Nintendo because he's so mad at them. Like, what is that going to get us? So anyway, I get it.
Yeah. Let's move on to upcoming games real quick. We've got just the games that are coming out between now and the next episode. We've got Batman Arkham Shadow, which is that VR game, which I've actually heard good things about. Like, that sounds interesting. I don't have a Quest, so I can't check that out. There's Predator Hunting Grounds, Throne and Liberty, Until Dawn on PC and PS5, NHL, SpongeBob Pants, the Patrick Star game, Silent Hill 2, which my son will not stop talking about. He's very hyped for that game. Diablo 4, Vessel of Hatred, Metaphor, and Dragon Ball. Any of these games interesting to any of you guys?
Didn't Predator Hunting Grounds come out like years ago? Like, or am I mixing it up with a different game? Remember there's like a pet predator.
That's the asynchronous one, right? Where somebody plays as the predator and the other people are playing as. Yeah, I think you're right.
2020 multiplayer game. Yeah. So maybe
was it only on PC?
No, PS5, Xbox, PlayStation 4, Windows.
Wonder why it's listed to come out on October, like that it's supposed to have come out on October 1st.
Yeah, that's strange.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because this is over at GameRant.com that we're seeing that.
Yeah.
Maybe it is maybe the PS5 and Xbox Series ones are the ones that are coming out. Maybe because that 2020. Oh no, that was still PS5, right?
Oh, I bet you it was PS4 and Xbox One.
It's Unreal Engine 4. Yeah.
And now it's like the upgraded version for these. Okay, that makes sense. Well, regardless, Rich, anything on this list that's interesting to you?
A couple things. I've never played Until Dawn, so it coming to PC is a good opportunity for me to play that. So I'll try that out. Silent Hill 2 is getting really good reviews, right? Like reviews are out now. I think embargo is up. And so it seems like I think Jimmy compared this to like Space Marine for Saber. This is Bloober's like Space Marine 2 moment where like all the work that they've been doing has sort of culminated in this like hit where it's like coinciding with the fact that they're doing this like IP, right? Like that's already established. So it's good to see that. And I'm looking forward to trying Silent Hill 2 out. And then Metaphor, Atlas has been on a roll, and so Metaphor seems really good. I still haven't had a chance to try the demo, but I've heard good things. I heard it is not quite as optimized as we would like, but generally speaking, it's a good game.
Anything on this list for you, Russ?
I still have some feigning interest in Silent Hill 2, but I did read just headlines of some of the reviews, and people were saying it's scary, and I'm like, well, maybe not. I always thought of it as like a creepy game and not scary, and so it's like I don't know. Like I just started playing Resident Evil 4 for like for real the first time, and I got through like the first house part, and that was a lot. And so I can imagine Silent Hill 2 might be a little too much for me. The photorealism of like modern games is just it messes with my monkey brain, so it's kind of hard, But also Batman Arkham Shadow, I do have MetaQuest 3. I'm somewhat interested in that. One of the reasons why I didn't play a lot of the Arkham games back in the day is because when I played them, they first came out when I was here in Hawaii as well, and my TV was in a room that had a lot of sun in it, and it was so hard to see that game, but like a VR headset is the best way to play a dark game, because everything's dark. And so I'm like, oh, that might actually fit with me in the way I play games. And so, yeah, maybe.
Very cool. Diablo 4 is on here, Vessel of Hatred. That brings a new character. Russ, don't get it. You didn't really like Diablo 4 the first time around.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna pick this up and I'm gonna play the hell out of it because I love Diablo 4. I think it's a great game, and I need an excuse to go back to it because it's the kind of game that I can just sit down on the couch, PS5 controller in hand, a podcast on, and I can shut my brain off and just listen to a podcast and run around and kill demons. That's the kind of game that I want to play because I just don't care about the story, and I don't have to listen. Like, just one of the reasons I never like. You look at these games that have a really good story, and I always put them off, and I put them off because they require my attention. Game like Diablo does not require my attention. I can just run around and murder demons and get loot and look at the numbers and say, "Hey, the numbers went up. I'm excited about that," and then do it again. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. None of these other ones really are jumping out at me as something that I'm interested in. But if I did have a Quest 3, I would be probably picking up the Batman Arkham Shadow game because I love those Arkham games. They're really, really fun.
I think just, October. Next Fest is in October as well. So
oh, that's right.
Get your Steam Decks ready.
That's right. There's going to be tons of demos.
You're going to download all the demos and not play any of them. That's what I do.
I've done that quite a few times, and then the demos are gone after Steam Next Fest, and they're still on my. Although they did change that, didn't they? Where they'll automatically just vanish if after like they didn't Valve change something about demos?
They did, but the disappearing will still happen. That has nothing to do with what they changed. So like for Next Fest, what happens is that like the demos are supposed to be in this case October 14th to the 21st. Sometimes those demos will be available early, so prior to the 14th, and sometimes they will be available later, so after the 21st. But 14th to 21st is the window. If they're available early or late, consider yourself lucky.
Right, but what I was saying is the demos would no longer work after a certain day, which is fine. But then Valve made it so that when that happens and it's no longer available, it gets removed from your inventory automatically, so that it's not like, so if you downloaded a bunch of demos, you're not going to see them all afterwards.
I'm not sure if it extends to that, but yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah. Well, it looks like that's going to do it for us today. Rich, what's your next video coming out?
I don't know. So I have this video that I'm working on, which is a Ubisoft thing. So just taking a look at their history and like critically looking at their history. And just like I said, I don't think there's a happy ending to the story, right? So that's probably my next video. But if not, it'll be a new news video.
And what about you, Russ?
So I'm working on a review of the Retroid Pocket Mini. So this is the latest Retroid device, Android-based, Snapdragon 865. Mario's on the screen. Sorry about that. It won't be in the video.
Blur it.
Yeah, but I've been just testing this for a while. It's a 4x3 powerful Android device, which are rare.
Is that the one that's OLED?
It's also OLED,
okay.
And also they have already fully released all the drivers and stuff, OpenGL and Vulkan drivers for Linux. And so already Rocknix, which is like what became of Jealous, which is like that emulation station driven Linux based firmware, they already have a test build. I'm going to be getting it tomorrow, and I'll be putting it in the video as well. So this thing will be Linux friendly, and Batocera also will be working for it at some point, not just yet. And so this, in addition to being like an exciting Android-based handheld, this may also be the very first powerful Linux-based ARM handheld that we've had that's also of good build quality. And so there's a lot of interesting things about this one. And so I'm trying to make the video like less than an hour. We'll see how this goes.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, that's the next video.
Oh, man. I made a video talking about Nintendo and emulation and stuff like that. And at the end of the video, I talked about this thing here, which is the new colorway for the RG35XX SP. And what this really makes me want is for somebody to release a thing that's exactly like this, but with a bigger screen that's OLED, 120 hertz, so you can have black frame insertion, and don't change anything else about it. It doesn't have to be that much more powerful, Yeah. I just want to have that. Once I got my hands on the Steam Deck OLED, I don't want LCD screens anymore. I always like the super deep blacks of an OLED screen. Just make those old retro games look so damn good.
Yeah. It's again, for me, it's one of those things where it's awesome for 2 minutes, and then I just don't even see it anymore. Yeah, that's just how I am. But yeah,
that's fair. Well, that's going to do it for us. Make sure that you go and subscribe to youtube.com/retrogamecore and youtube.com/fanthedeck. And hopefully, well, I screwed that up there at the end. Hopefully, we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for hanging out with us. Stay rad, everybody.
See you guys.
Bye, guys.